Hello, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here with us today from across Asia and the Pacific, and perhaps the rest of the globe. We're gathered all here under the United Nations Forum on Business and Human Rights. And our topic for this session is organized by the International Labour Organization and United Nations Development Programme to discuss the business responsibility for the future of youth employment in the Pacific. But we may have a question here. Why youth employment today is more important than ever before? Well, young people face a lot of serious challenges. Uh, for some of us may know that it's often a larger share of unemployment represent young men and women, and compared to adults. Young people also tend to have limited set of skills relatively to a short period of experience, which makes them quite difficult for them to access the labor market. Very often we report that their skills even or the kind of experience they have do not match the demand side, what the job market is asking for today or even for the future. In addition to all of that, we see that the largest number of young people usually is concentrated in the informal economy, which makes them often in a very vulnerable situation, have less secured wages, secure jobs, and also lower productivity employment. We also see that young people have limited access to legal rights or even social protections. Across Asia and the Pacific, the rate of young people not in employment, education, or training, which we call NEET, is in South Asia and the Pacific in particular, represents around 30%. And three quarters of that are actually represented by young women. So this tells you a lot about why young people face a different type of challenge from the rest of different age brackets. Now, to engage business or to invite business to step in is basically more important than ever before, because business has the expertise, the knowledge. They know exactly what the future is going to look like. If business has adopted environmental sustainability strategy, or if they are undergoing a digital transformation, they actually tend to shape of the kind of skills that we need today for the next generations. And that's why we have decided to invite our esteemed panelists who are going to participate in this discussion. Allow me to introduce our panelists. We have here our guest, Mr. Faizal Khan. Mr. Khan, he's the director and registrar of cooperatives. He's also the acting director of MSME program in Fiji at the Ministry of Commerce, Trade, Tourism, and Transport. Mr. Khan has an extensive experience working with public enterprises and state-owned enterprises. He has also experience in MSME policy development and project implementation for cooperatives in MSMEs in Fiji. Our second guest here, Ms. Lote Lima. Ms. Lima is the Member Services Manager of Samoa Chamber of Commerce. She is currently managing a membership of over 450 businesses and organizations. She has developed an extensive knowledge of Samoa's private sector. Ms. Lima also worked as the national coordinator of the internship program in Samoa, which has been running for the last 5 years. Our third panelist here, Ms. Mererai Vatege. She's a lawyer by profession, and she's a young trade unionist. She is currently working as the Senior Industrial Relations Officer for the National Union of Workers in Fiji. We also have here our fourth guest speaker, Ms. Millicent Barty, who is the social entrepreneur, educational designer, and an advocate for entrepreneurial pursuits to empower youth and women from Solomon Islands and the Pacific. Ms. Barty is also a member and a formal chair of the Young Entrepreneurs Council in Solomon Islands. And last but not least, we have Mr. Avinit Narayan, who is a young entrepreneur and a founder of Suva based enterprising Pacific consultancy. He works in the area of youth entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial ecosystem in the Pacific. Thank you very much, our speakers for today. Allow me to, moving on with our session, to start with a 5 minutes opening statements by each one of you. I will invite Mr. Khan to proceed.
Thank you very much for this well welcome and introduction to our colleagues connected virtually, and to the ILO and UNDP. Thank you very much for facilitating this virtual meeting, and I think it provides a essential platform for us to and discuss policy developments relating to young entrepreneurs. Um, I would like to also, on behalf of the Honorable Minister for Commerce, Trade, Tourism and Transport, it is my pleasure to be here to discuss matters related to young entrepreneurs and the policy development. And as the government arm, we understand the critical role that youth play in entrepreneurship. And in our nation, that is why under the national development policy that we have, our national framework, we have got a strategic objective in promoting entrepreneurial culture through sustainable micro, medium, and through sustainable micro, small, medium enterprise practices. Ladies and gentlemen, pre-COVID time in PG, the MSME sector contributed close to 18%, close to 60% was the labor force. Therefore, our policies needs to be in the two elements together. There be any disconnect, the business, the ministry responsible for development and growth of MSMEs in PG. We have developed various policies in this in MSME framework with various policies implemented relatively young and small nation with a young population. We need to create an enabling environment for our youth to thrive. We understand that one of the major challenges that businesses or young entrepreneurs face is obviously access to finance, and in recognition of the fact, in recognition of this fact, the Fijian government has paid close to 90 million out of this 25 million has been invested in these entrepreneurial programs. Obviously, the government, as earlier mentioned, the government recognizes the fact that with our youth ambassadors, we need them to be job creators instead of job seekers. So there is a paradigm shift in the way we look at our youths, and in our efforts of supporting youth, and ministry has developed a funding program called the Young Entrepreneurship Scheme. This is obviously targeted to young entrepreneurs who have a unique and innovative idea. And since its inception, we've received close to 500 applications already. Obviously, this is not the only program that we have. There is other programs such as the National Strategy, the Northern Development Program, and also these are in addition to a number of other various livelihood supporting schemes that's run by other ministries as well, because we understand the need for access to finance is a very big impediment for. But I guess we understand that much more needs to be done. Much more. It's not about just giving finance. It's also about hand-holding, and mentoring. It's about advocating for sustainable business practices. Therefore, creating a right environment is important. In order to create the right environment, we need to have policies that is innovative, that is flexible, and that is forward-looking. Ladies and gentlemen, our youth are our agents of change. We need to change the way we do business. We need to change the way we think. We need to readjust to the new normal. We need to adapt new protocols and operate in a COVID safe manner. we need policies that is reflective. Firstly, as policymakers, as policymakers, we hold a number of engagement and consultations with the private sector. We believe that there is no use in having a policy that does. Just to conclude, our consultations has now taken a new way of doing consultations. Whilst we do have traditional ways of doing consultations for policy meetings, such as letters and emails, but we have also taken on the virtual approach, such as holding various dialogues through virtual meetings that we have right now. We also take feedback through our Facebook pages, and we've also we've got a dedicated helpline, a MSME helpline, where people can call and tell us what is working, what is not. Because eventually we want the burden of ease of doing business to be lifted. We need to have an enabling environment for businesses to thrive, especially for young entrepreneurship. But I believe a lot more can be done, and therefore using this platform, we are here to hear you out, we are here to learn from you, and we are here to take back any suggestions that can be used to improve the work that we are doing. With those said, we look forward to fruitful and collaborative discussions. Vinaka.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khan. Now moving to our second speaker, Ms. Lote Lima. May I ask you to take the floor? Ms. Lote, can you hear us? Ms. Lote. Yes, can you go ahead?
Hi there. Hope you guys can hear me well. Yes.
It looks like there is a connectivity problem. Let's give it another try. If it doesn't work, maybe we come back to Ms. Lote later. We cannot hear you. We cannot hear you. I'm sorry. Can our technical team figure out the problem? And if we to save the time, I will go ahead now. We'll come back to Ms. Lote. I hope that the technical team will be able to tell her that we will move to another speaker. Please, may I ask now Ms. Mererai Vatege to step in, please, and to give her opening statements.
Thank you, Mr. Albanese, and Bulavinaka to all the my fellow panelists present here this afternoon. I'm so glad for this opportunity to be a representative from the workers' side of things as a chairperson of the Fiji Trade Union Congress Youth Committee. And allow me to just elaborate a few things on the needs of young people to find productive and decent employment in the Pacific. First and foremost, the rights of workers should be upheld or promoted at all times to ensure decent jobs. That is why we have trade unions in place. Unions provide a mechanism for workers, particularly young workers, to raise their employment issues, employment grievances. Hence, employers need to be accommodative of union presence within the workplace. The other thing that I'd like to mention is that the need for investment in training and skills, retraining due to innovative forms of doing tasks. The pandemic has really changed a lot of things, and we believe that employers must invest to enhance productivity during this crisis. Work forms have changed. Many are working from home. Many have switched to alternative working conditions, and the office is no longer the official work site. So the question is, how can employers ensure that young workers adapt to these changing circumstances? I look forward to having a very great discussion with the fellow panelists here this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, moving on, I'll ask our guest, Ms. Millicent Barty, to give her opening remarks.
Good fellow afternoon, Olketa from the Happy Isle, Solomon Islands. Tagetumas moderator for this fellow opportunity to share on how young people working in the informal sector are mostly affected by COVID-19 pandemic. While our country, by God's grace, has managed to contain and prevent community spread of the COVID-19 to date, there is no doubt the pandemic is still having major impacts on the everyday life of young men and women here in the Solomons. Just for context, we may or may not be aware, but in the region, in the Pacific region, more than half the region's population, some 10 million, is under the age of 25. For the Solomon Islands, our population is over 700,000, where 70%, so over 500,000, is made up of young men and women under the age of 35. With one of the highest birth rates in the region at 2.5%, the rapidly burgeoning youth population, coupled with very limited employment opportunities in public, private, and informal sectors, present a serious need to harness innovative approaches to provide socioeconomic opportunities to empower our young people. Unfortunately, we don't have great employment statistics like in other countries, but to begin understanding our domestic context, I would like to reflect on the 16,000 to 4,000 reality ratio. It's worsened now with COVID repatriations of thousands of students returning home, but every year, 16,000 youth enter the job market only to be dispirited by the reality of less than 4,000 jobs available to them. Between the 6,000 to 8,000 of this 16,000 are dropouts, or as I prefer, pushouts of our education system. A system where the current education curriculum does not prepare students with the appropriate levels of skills, knowledge, and attributes for the labor market. In general, limited employment opportunities in the private sector and government. Mind you, the public sector is the largest employer here, makes it difficult for the rapidly increasing young labor force to find formal or informal employment. Entrepreneurial opportunities are also limited. Young people have no access to capital or credit. Where these are available, stringent regulatory requirements make it incredibly hard for youths to access these opportunities to start their own businesses or be self-employed. And with our traditional norms and practices that are predominantly patriarchal, young women and young persons with disability are the most vulnerable. Also in our context, an absence of micro and small enterprises, MSCs, in the informal economy to lack the capacity to generate sufficient transitioning from the informal to formal economy to create jobs. As we're experiencing without my fellow participants, panelists here today, connectivity here in our region remains a huge barrier for young people. And for the Solomon Islands, with 80% of our population living in rural areas, despite the newly introduced undersea cable, connectivity remains inaccessible to most. So to To escape the traps individuals are facing trying to make a living from subsistence farming and fishing, with the current disruption in international trade of our agri-commodities, many young people are venturing to Honiara, the capital, where I am, and this is contributing to an increase in urban drift, informal settlements, and unemployment lines. Now, combine these pre-existing vulnerabilities with our proneness to natural disasters, threats of climate change too, if I may add, plus the COVID-19 pandemic, where detrimental impacts on our economy have been experienced from the closure of our tourism sector, market disruptions, and the diversion of donor public funds from infrastructure development and construction, where most young people are active in informal employment, and other roll-on effects of the global pandemic. Hands down, young men and women are currently the frontliners to job losses, heightened stress and tension, which has also increased family violence and displacement. A first-hand example that I can share is just over the last 3 months alone, more than 20 of my young friends and relatives who had decent employment from cross-cutting sectors, a handful of them lawyers, carpenters, teachers, a lot from the tourism sector and government, they've all left our country to join the 3-year seasonal workers program in Australia. I myself had to diversify to even hiring out my vehicle as a means to survive the impacts of COVID. On that note, my dear friends, consistent with youth unemployment challenges across the region, we are standing at a crossroads with 2 pathways ahead of us: a demographic dividend or a demographic time bomb. With COVID-19 impacts, we are headed towards a demographic time bomb. Our work, no matter how big or small, I would like to remind us all that it must contribute to transforming the youth bulge into a demographic dividend so we can diffuse the impending demographic time bomb with innovative solutions. Our future depends heavily on the critical decisions that we make today. Tagyo Tomas.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barty, for this opening statements. Moving to our second guest, but before I ask Mr. Narayan, I want to see if Ms. Lima seems to be back on the stage online. So may I ask you to give your remarks, and hopefully now the connection would be fine. Ms. Lote, can you hear me? Okay, I think there's still a problem. Yeah, no, she's disconnecting again. Okay, so let's just go to our fifth guest for today, Mr. Avinit. May I ask you to step in, please?
Thank you for that. Hello, everyone. What I was asked was in regards to entrepreneurs being an inspiration for youth in this particular situation. So I just wanted to start this off with saying that during crisis, lockdowns and restricted movements are being a norm. However, dealing with issues as an entrepreneur that is created by these activities is a totally different thing on its own. Most importantly, as an entrepreneur, you're not just self-employed and a breadwinner for your own family. You're also indirectly responsible for your team as your business enables them to be breadwinners as well. You're an employer, hence you are a team. You have a team that trusts. You have a trusted team of employees that look up to you for directions, emotional support, financial support during this trying times. So how do you become this person and set your own personal issues aside, with this pandemic, simply put, you do what all entrepreneurs do best: find solutions and move forward. My entrepreneurial journey is quite long. Started in 2007 as a 24-year-old who started a franchise restaurant, and then this venture for me personally was a failure due to a number of factors, and I took from it and learned to embrace failure and to know when to let go, which is very important. Fast tracked, I currently have 2 businesses running in Fiji. One is basically an essential service provider. We provide water tanks, water carting facilities around the country. Luckily, since we're in essential services, we were allowed to operate during lockdowns. However, due to the demand of the service, we are currently, unfortunately, operating at 40%. The second business, which is Enterprising Pacific, as mentioned by the moderator, deals and works in the space of youth entrepreneurship in the Pacific. Pre-COVID, we were fortunate enough to be part and to establish young entrepreneurs councils in 7 Pacific Islands under the private sector organizations. During COVID, during this time, I could travel, and unfortunately, during COVID, I was grounded, and therefore, all my contracts were on hold for 6 months. Therefore, 0 income for that particular venture. But we have turned that into a positive by going digital. So we're doing digital training and trying to work online and doing certain contracts via the internet. Again, connectivity is also an issue here for most Pacific Island countries. The other things that I also had looked at was the opportunities, which is I'm looking into new startup possibilities, again, problem solving with current situation, and education. As entrepreneurs, we're always learning. And I think going and ensuring that you do take certain courses along the way is very important for your overall mindset. During this 1 year, I realized I became more closer to my staff, and we continuously shared situations and on a daily basis, and we found solutions together. I was fortunate that we didn't have to let go of some of the staff, although some did venture out to look for other opportunities. But the fact of the matter is that we had to go and reduce pay and reduce hours for operations. Luckily, I'm part of a national youth entrepreneurs coalition, the Young Entrepreneurs Council, which is under the Fiji Commerce and Employees Federation. And most of my support mechanisms came through these like-minded entrepreneurs who shared their situation, who shared best practices, solutions, and ensured that we worked together to ensure all of us stayed afloat during this time. This also included, we have an SME network and a small business networking community on Viber and Facebook that also contributed towards my peace of mind in regards to this. As a member of Fiji Commerce and Employees Federation, the other facilities and enablers that I was also able to tap into was the Business Link Pacific programs, also the business continuity plan that was offered straight after COVID hit us last year, which basically helped during the second wave of this pandemic. I'm still learning, as most of us are during this pandemic. It's more trial and error, but I know for a fact, one thing is certain: we need to collaborate, we need to diversify, we need to be in consultations with key stakeholders, and this is the only way we can move forward in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Avinit. I'll try to give now Ms. Lote one more chance to see if she can come in. Can you try, please? Let's hope it works now. Oh, obviously she cannot hear me. Yeah. Okay. All right. Something obviously is going wrong here. Miss
Okay.
Lote
Can you hear
Lima,
me?
she is. Oh, there she is. Yes, yes. Go ahead. Oh, no, no. We lost it again. No, we lost
Can
it
you hear
again.
me?
Sorry.
Can you hear me
Yes.
now?
Yes, we can hear you. Something, I don't know. It seems like the connection is breaking up or something. Yeah. Let's try. Okay. We lost the screen. Yeah, she's back. Go on. Okay, I'm not sure if our technical specialist can figure out this problem, but obviously we do have connection issue. Let's hope that Ms. Lote Lima from the Samoa Chamber of Commerce will be able to connect back. I will now move to our second part of the discussion, which is questions addressed directly to the panelists. Mr. Khan, you spoke about the enabling environment, and you've also talked about how essential that we create an effective environment for young people and also for entrepreneurs to thrive. So this is definitely an important. We've heard also about the very important initiatives that the ministry now is undertaking. Now, my question to you is how to shape an environment, enabling environment for businesses, like established businesses to invest and contribute more in the design and implementation of youth employment interventions. By this I mean, like, where we talk about policy on a policy level, what kind of environment we need, like, to engage those businesses to come in and talk about their challenges, to talk about their also future future activities, to see how we can make this policy driven toward both sides, business and job seekers, or even youth interests. Over to you.
Thank you, Kinan, and thank you, moderator, for this for the question. I think that's a very critical and important question as well. There's various things that we can do to enable businesses to thrive in an enabling environment. Obviously, the most basic one is collaboration. I think we should be open to undertake or listen to the private sector, what they're telling us, because whilst we as policymakers, it's the private sector who takes the policies and implement them and operate within that particular framework. So a lot of dialogue is needed, a lot of discussions is needed. Even when we introduce any changes to policies, obviously there has to be a reasonable basis for making changes in those policies, how it's going to affect those businesses, whether positively, negatively. So what we, like I earlier alluded to, what we normally have done now is we connect with the key apex bodies that's operating in a business environment. While for example, we've got the Fiji Chamber of Commerce, we've got the Fiji Chamber of Accountants, we've got the Fiji Employees Federation. We also have got we also reach out to the other apex bodies such as the cooperatives. Sometimes we also engage a lot with the YEC Council as well, the Young Entrepreneurs Council. Beyond that is the LOPC as well that's there. So these are various groups or agencies that forms that voice for different business segments in the business environment. And that's where we get our feedback from. That is how we consult. We also do online consultations as well. As Mr. Narayan also had mentioned earlier on, there's Viber groups as well, which the ministry is part of. We also got a Facebook feedback page where people send us messages or engage us on our page. So these are some of the ways that we hope to get more feedback. We also in the process of undertaking reforms in our ease of doing business. So, for example, right now, through feedback from the industry, we have reduced, like for example, the need to have a business license. So right now we don't need a business license. We have gone online in terms of business registration. So if you need to register a business fees, you can go and do this online. I understand connectivity issue also remains. So what has happened is that there is through our various government agencies, they double up as um, agencies that can also do business registration. So it's all scattered all over the main business areas instead of previously it has been in just the capital of Fiji. So this is now also all available all over Fiji. Those services, access to legal as well. The legal aid that we have in Fiji. I understand in open remarks they was talking about how there is lack of access to the judicial system. So that's also available through the legal aid system. All these key players create a environment that is needed for business to thrive. And what connects them all together is the policy. And policies obviously needs to be innovative. They need to be forward thinking. They need to be flexible as well. Just through this platform, we'll be working on creating and developing a MSME Act and also amending our Cooperatives Act. So this is probably through those legislations, we hope to get more feedback, particularly from the private sector and maybe the youth and the women entrepreneurs. So that's something that we can look forward to. Vinaka.
Vinaka, thank you. Well, that's obvious. Yeah, that's very good. Actually, that we do provide this type of platforms, or at least a space for businesses to come in and to contribute. Because as we noted earlier, that businesses do have a very good experience. They have resources. They could actually really help to shape the future skills of the young people. So I think, and when it comes to policy design and development, having them on board and dedicating their time and effort and even resources to implement those policies would be quite essential as well, to ensure that that the policies have been implemented in favor of everybody. Thank you very much. I'm not sure now how is the situation with Miss Lote. I hope that. No, we cannot hear you. Okay, I'm sorry. There's probably, we need to change the internet connection on your side, I guess, or yeah.
There, is that better?
Yes. Now it's better. Hopefully,
Okay.
it remains like this.
Third time's the charm.
Okay,
so
go ahead.
hopefully, yes. So did
Okay.
you want me to speak from my opening remarks first?
Yes. If you can just briefly tell us, yes, give us a bit of the opening statement, and then I will move to the question as well.
Okay, so just in regards for policy making, coming from a private sector organization, we do note that it's very vital, and being able to contribute and have a seat at these discussions, it's so important because these are the changes that are being made right now, especially with government. So businesses share a lot of important information that assists policymakers just to help them understand the current situation, the business environment, and also changes across different sectors. In particular, with the COVID-19 pandemic right now, it's very important for us as the Samoa Chamber of Commerce to have that dialogue with government. The Samoa Chamber, we're actually quite fortunate to be involved in policy making through our representation on government boards and also committees. This also broadens out to our qualifications authority. We have representation there. This is something we have voiced for the need to have private sector there. It's allowed us to build better partnerships and networks with government, and also reestablishes our public-private partnership. There's a lot of information that businesses hold, and it's usually collected through the use of surveys, ongoing dialogue with businesses, as well as other platforms that we use to have that exchange with the private sector. all our policy submissions to government are done within our organization. So it's just a representation of how our businesses are feeling with the current economy and the business environment. And all these issues are then voiced through our policy submissions for change. Social value, it's quite broad, but what businesses can generate is social and economic development. Just by engaging policymakers, we can create jobs, decent work, new industries and sectors. There's quite a lot of opportunity out there, but the current issue right now is just this COVID pandemic, this limiting of how to do business. So that's one of the things we're struggling with right now. But it really is something that businesses do without realizing it, that they are, building the economy and driving social and economic development. So, we do note that the importance of that connection between policymakers and also businesses as well. So yeah, just briefly on my opening remarks there. Thank you.
Excellent. And I'm glad that we managed to speak with you. So I'm going to actually continue, if you don't mind, and ask you the question right away, just to make sure that the connection now is doing well. So Ms. Lima, let me ask you this. Now, as you said, like obviously the business believe in the importance of youth and also believes in the importance of creating jobs for young people. Now, but my question to you is that what motivates, by this I mean, like, what are the challenges today and opportunities that businesses could do to collaborate with government and other actors to promote youth employment? Like, other than the type of business activities that they do, can they just do beyond the normal and to step in and to align forces with the government and with other collaborators as well in the country, other international organizations as well, to actually come in and do some serious work on promoting youth employment?
Yes, I think, being a responsible business is kind of like a norm now, it does take a while for some businesses to kind of grow because, they don't realize they're doing it. But there's always that factor of wanting to give back to the community and address any issue that they feel strongly about. And youth unemployment in particular is one issue that the Sangho Chamber with its members is working really hard to address. And then an example of some of the work that we do is we run internship programs. Currently now, our internship programs is just for youth who have little to no qualifications. So, high school dropouts or things like that, just because, we want to give them the opportunity to be in the work environment. We understand graduates come back, they have that degree and things like that. We're just trying to work with that target of youth. However, we are looking at broadening it. We are looking to work more with universities and also some of our trade sectors to kind of get them involved as well. We have a youth collab. That's something, innovation thing we have working with young entrepreneurs. It's just a forum for those who have, a startup idea or want to scale their business up. Just providing that training and capacity building, just to help and help develop them as well. Right now with COVID-19, we've pushed for assistance for the private sector, in particular with the economy right now. So we were able to work with the Ministry of Finance. We have good relationship with our government ministries. So we are able to collaborate with a lot of activities that look at these kind of issues, in particular youth unemployment. Promoting youth employment, I think the link here is not only reducing risk and liability, it's about improving sustainability. And that's the important linkage there, because for a business to be sustainable, there needs to be a market, there needs to be customers, there needs to be consumers. And this in turn creates jobs because, businesses need that manpower within their business to carry out their affairs and things like that. So it's just the need, we know that there's a lack of some opportunities, but businesses are motivated to give back where they can and provide that assistance as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We've managed to have your contributions so far. Great. Let's move on to our third question. Ms. Mererai. Now, as a unionist, I mean, you're representing here the voice of young people, and you did share earlier that young people do go to a hardship, especially when in the time of graduation, the time of looking for a job, and you talked about all sorts of barriers as well. Now, so what can business do? Now, this is the question to you. What can business do to help those young people, to safeguard them from this labor market vulnerabilities that has been really exacerbated now because of COVID-19 pandemic? Over to you.
Moderator. Thank you for that question. As I have mentioned earlier in my opening statement, one of the biggest needs for young people right now is investment trainings and investment in skills and reskilling training and those kind of programs. Now, the pandemic, the crisis has really undermined the growing economic development in Fiji within the region. That's a given. It has exposed a lot of things, especially for young people. Young people were the most affected. They were the very first to be made redundant, to lose their jobs. When major industries, for instance, in Fiji, when the tourism industry was affected by COVID, when COVID hit last year, most of the young people in the tourism sector lost their jobs, the airline industry as well. So when this happened, it exposed a lot of issues for young people. Social security. Social security is not only important nationally, it is also important at employer level. Now, the question that we got to ask is, how can employers ensure that for the period of lockdown or the period that the workers have been made redundant or have lost their jobs, how can they ensure that he has a place to live if he does not have a house? He or she does not have a house of his own, is on rent. How can he ensure that he continues to pay for rent, to put food on the table, to pay for utilities? We know of some good employers here in Fiji who have provided one-off fortnightly cash allowance, food packs to their employees who have been badly affected during this crisis. This is just to ensure that workers are not being displaced. The other thing is that employers, the business community, can provide retraining opportunities. Like I've mentioned, when COVID hit, when workers are made redundant, there are roles within the company, roles within the organization that have been made redundant. So what employers can do is provide retraining opportunities for these workers to be able to take another opportunity within the organization, or train them for roles available outside of the organization. Emphasis on reskilling workers who are still in employment, who may be on reduced hours, reduced pay, who may be on leave without pay, whatever the arrangements may be. So reskilling programs for them, and also for those who have just recently lost their jobs or have been made redundant. Now, the other thing that I'd like to mention is employers can also provide opportunities to workers who have been locked out of their place of employment, say, for example, who are in containment zone, who are in lockdown areas. And if, for example, the office or the place of work is within the containment zone and the employee has been locked out, is outside of the lockdown area or the containment zone, how can the employer ensure that the employee continues to get paid, or what arrangements the employer has done for the employee? The other thing is employers can also assist young workers to learn and acquire new set of skills while still on the jobs, like I said, reskilling or upskilling whilst in employment. For example, teaching them about green concepts of production, environmental sustainability. These are some of the things that we, the employers, can assist young people, young workers in, especially during this crisis. Now, the other thing is employers must ensure that they take appropriate measures, steps based on humanitarian grounds, and not treat young workers as a number, or as they say, labor is not a commodity. So these are just some of the things that we believe the business community can look at to support young people today who have been badly affected by the current pandemic. Now, the other thing is collaboration. Say, for example, last year, the Fiji Trade Union Congress, together with the Fiji Commerce and Employers Federation and the ILO, partnered together to conduct transition to business training. This is something that can also be done. They can continue to do this to assist workers who have been affected by the pandemic, who have lost jobs and have transitioned into SMEs, small, medium business enterprises. So this emphasis on training, business training for these workers who have ventured into small businesses. And yes, like I mentioned, collaboration between the key partners, employers federation, the workers organization, to help the workers during this difficult time. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much for also a very interesting contribution. Now, moving on, our question to Ms. Barty. Now, as a youth leader, you were the former chair of the Young Entrepreneurs Council in Solomons. What do you think about the role of youth organizations, playing a role to raise awareness around the issues of youth employment, and also to support collaboration and coordination among different actors, in particular, the business community?
Thank you so much for the question. In my opinion, raising awareness on issues affecting young people and employment is crucial, and our efforts regionally have been adequate. But due to the urgency of addressing youth unemployment, raising awareness alone now just presents as not enough. Sure, we can do more with the dissemination of information to make sure that it's far and wide reaching, particularly leveraging of technology today. And particularly also in promoting entrepreneurship to rally more support. But I believe our collaborative efforts need to be coupled with tangible outcomes in infrastructure, market access, and policy and legal frameworks, as other panelists have mentioned. Our shared vision and common collective goal of creating opportunities for capacity building and enabling environments for young people need, as I mentioned before, more innovative approaches to enhance employment and entrepreneurship opportunities. And as a youth leader, and also part of the ecosystem, this nascent entrepreneurial ecosystem, it must be central to governments, all stakeholders, public and private. Youth development and economic empowerment must be central in all our efforts. But at the end of the day, at the end of the government of the day, actually, it is also the political will to prioritize youth development, creative, conducive environments, and better labor market access that is really needed to address some of the issues at hand. And I can share an example of where, you know, as a former chairperson of our Young Entrepreneurs Council here in Solomons over the last 3 years, this public-private partnership model as our establishment in terms of coordination has been quite effective, particularly as part of our advocacy work. So we have this advocacy agenda themed under Ample Period for Growth. And this looks at how best we can support the nourishment of new businesses, as well as entice informal businesses where most young entrepreneurs are participating in, to transition well into contributing to our formal economy. Now, one of the ideas under this agenda is pushing for a special license with our Honiara City Council for a grace period of 3 to 5 years, enough ample time for new businesses to grow, because this has been experienced by young entrepreneurs that expensive business licenses are a huge barrier to the startup phase of their business. Whilst that coordination has been undergoing with other actors, the collaboration aspect of it, particularly with public sector actors, have been quite challenging. I mean, it's been 4 years now, and this is still in the works because we just don't have that lobbying power or political will to get support. But yeah, I think everything needs to cohesively work together in order to, you know, truly promote youth entrepreneurship and, you know, access to employment. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot. Now, our question now to Avinit, as an entrepreneur. Now, you're obviously now going through a very difficult time, you know, because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we would like to know more about some of the opportunities and challenges that are actually this pandemic itself has brought to young people. And in what way this could actually be seen also as let's say, a light of hope for a new job opportunities for the youth. Over to you. Avinit?
Thank you. Youth unemployment was always an issue and a challenge for the Pacific pre-COVID anyway. We are not landlocked. We're a small-sized nation with limited growth in new industries. Creating a youth bulge, as Millicent had mentioned in her opening statement. We already have situations where some of the challenges with COVID that has introduced is we've lost industries, such as our tourism industry, which is our massive industry for most Pacific Islands. And the first people to go are, unfortunately, the lesser skilled, lesser experienced young people. To add on to that, we have these unemployed skilled workers adding on to the youth bulge, pushing the youth further down in the employment possibility line. There's another component which I want to mention is a lot of these youths are now returning home as well. So bigger family communities are building up. There's a lot of social dynamics happening. There's a lot of family violence that's occurring, as Millicent also mentioned. And no one is hiring, to be honest, because there are no new jobs. There's a lot of people who are losing jobs, existing jobs. And it's very difficult for unemployed youths and young people to meet basic needs. Now, we could say entrepreneurship, which pre-COVID was one of the alternatives to unemployment. And a lot of progress in the Pacific has happened. in that space, promoting entrepreneurship, policy changes, the traditional aspects of things when it comes to SME training and dialogue and advocacy. And as Millicent mentioned, we can only do that so far. With COVID, we've created, and we have to have a different approach to this whole scenario and situation where we can actually, yes, we're doing good training, we're addressing some of the policy issues, we're having dialogue, but what's the next step? What are the next steps forward? What are we doing differently? So say, for example, if we're looking at entrepreneurship, there's limited to no opportunities right now to have startups. A lot of young people or a lot of persons who have lost their jobs have started small businesses, home delivery systems, food and also other aspects of creative industry has started. But where is the sustainability component? What are we doing about this? How are they going to sustain this livelihood of this? The other thing is all the other businesses, when we're talking about either small business or industry, they have done cutbacks. They have to survive. So everyone's on survival mode. Even the SMEs are. So how do we enable an environment for these SMEs and these business holders, who are job creators, by the way, to once again survive, stabilize, grow, and then also provide that creative job space that we're all talking about. Something that was mentioned, I think, by Lote was also looking at the traditional approach of internship and apprenticeships. Pre-COVID, these programs were running perfectly fine, but now, because a lot of businesses have lost employees and it is costing money, they will tend to go into these schemes. But my question is this going to be a decent work environment for the employee? Is it just going to be for the period of the COVID space? And then will they get what's the sustainability component for that? Will they get a position in the company? Or are they just going to, what unfortunately is getting used and then left behind, and then somebody else takes the position later on? So all these questions need to be addressed. The other aspect, now we have to look at solutions here. So the importance right now is to have intermediation services available for both SMEs and youth, unemployed youths and the youths as a whole. So what we're talking about here is the focus should be on the psychosocial impacts that COVID has happened on these individuals. What are we doing about it? Are we having counseling separately for these young people? What is the public employment services doing about it? And how are we looking at existing businesses and their financial structures? How are we assisting the loan aspects that they already currently have, so they can stay in business and therefore continue employing the staff and retaining the staff that they have? Because if the business dies, so does the jobs with it that it created. So we have to, and then you have one more business person who used to be an entrepreneur adding on to the unemployment list as an employee. So you have to consider those aspects as well. Now, firstly, these businesses need to stabilize, as I mentioned before. If we're looking at this entrepreneurship as a solution, as an opportunity, then we definitely have to look at it as an holistic approach where all parties are involved. There is continuous collaborations. There's a conducive environment for businesses to grow, to stay afloat. Yes, we still have to comply with certain COVID restrictions and abilities, but then tap into other aspects, like we have digital platforms now. One of the things that's currently in conversations is the global market. We have access. This is an opportunity. Global market is an opportunity. However, with digitization comes certain costs. So infrastructure costs we have to look into. We also have to look at policy changes, because we have some old policies that needs to reflect the new changes. And then the ease of transition from traditional way of doing business and going digital. And how are the banks playing the role in here? Because everyone wants to go, we're all advocating about going online, doing our business online. But in order for me to run a business online, I need mechanisms. I need support mechanisms from certain stakeholders, such as banks, to provide me with payment services, credit card payment services, and so forth. Are these being looked at carefully and in detail to ensure that an SME who can only make 10,000 or 20,000 a year, can they actually afford to run these activities? So yeah, so in a nutshell, I think a lot of people have mentioned in regards to the opportunities and the challenges. I think that working together as a collaboration, having consultation, ensuring that we constantly micromanage the dialogue component of it in an inclusive environment where the private sector is heavily involved, because remember, this is where we need to have our voices heard and the policies to change accordingly, so we can actually be part of the change. Sustainability is a huge issue with a lot of these activities that we might be doing, and the only way we can do it is through having consultations and making the change properly. Thank you.
All right. Well, yes, indeed. Thank you all very much for all of the answers. Let me now share with you with one of the questions that we've received. So basically, I mean, this is going to be an open for anybody who would like to come in and answer it. Now, we have now some of these economic sectors in the Pacific. They're obviously absent, you know. Predominantly, tourism has been one of the major sector, has been mentioned already. Now, this does not seem to be very promising, and even if it is, it remains to be quite of I would say vulnerable sector in a way, where it's not securing you know, sustainable job opportunities, especially for young people. Now, so it's the time, Avinit mentioned dialogue, and he emphasized on the importance of this. So now comes the time where we actually really need to chart the way post-COVID, you know, what can be done now to look into this area and see of how we can create a new economic activities, not to be overly depending on a sector that has been perhaps been quite good at some time, but it's also been quite vulnerable either to the crisis, to the pandemic, or to the climate change that periodically hits the region. So any thoughts or ideas of what can be done, why business now, their role is important to kind of chart a new economic prosperity in a new activities? Anybody would like to jump in? I will go, Mr. Khan. Do you have any thoughts on that, since you're here representing the ministry?
Thank you for the question. I think it's a very relevant question given the times that we are in. Apart from the policy and legislative framework side, I think Fiji, we are lucky that we have a broad economic base. So when tourism did hit, yes, it did take a substantial hit on our economy. Close to 40% of our GDP just got wiped out. But I think we've got enough entrepreneurs. We've got manufacturing sectors, whether TCF, food manufacturers. We've got active construction sector as well. So we've got a very strong wholesale and retail sector. We've also got agriculture sector. So basically, what we've noticed is that a lot of people went back to agriculture. While people have been planting and producing, I think then one emerging sector we can also look at is moving these farmers or producers into value adding. So you move them up the supply chain, you make them manufacturers as well, so they can do add value. Packaging increases our exports, create more employment. So the multiplier effect is also realized there and then. I think another sector that we can probably look at, I think, given our relatively young population, is the BPO council. Our BPO sector, the processing outsourcing. So we in Fiji, we relatively have a young workforce, a good English speaking workforce. With our connectivity levels are quite strong, and I think would be one of the best in the region. So it creates 24 hours, and it's a very essential service. And given our position in the region, I think this is a potentially a sector that needs to be explored more, and probably bit more investments in those areas needs to be made. So I think those are the top 5 sectors. I think with the exception of tourism, I think that's the sectors that I would look at for economic activity and job creation: construction, manufacturing, for BPO, agriculture, and probably diversifying our manufacturing into value adding for full manufacturing. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else would like to comment on this question? I mean, the sustainability aspect. Thank you. I mean, what you've mentioned, Mr. Khan, is very important. How we actually really look into what are the emerging opportunities that have been happening now during the crisis, and try to equip the current and the upcoming generations to kind of meet the demand on that. Any thoughts from from Samoa, the Chamber of Commerce, on what can be done to create more of a resilient economic sectors that that's not going to be affected by similar crisis in Samoa? You need to unmute yourself.
Oh yeah. I think resilience, it's a word that you hear quite often now, but it's still taking some businesses time to adapt to that kind of business environment. But I think what we can do from the private sector is kind of just have more awareness, have more training. It actually goes hand in hand with establishing a business. Is that you have to make sure for continuity purposes that there is a plan in place for that. So I think to help sustain businesses, especially with becoming more resilient, that's our role, is to advocate, provide more opportunities for learning, any training that we can have to assist businesses and young entrepreneurs, especially. That's one service that we really want to push towards the private sector. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving to Mererai. Now, you talked about also decent work, and you said that young people are aspired to have a good working conditions. Now, what happens when young people are offered a good working conditions? Like, what is the return, to the business on this? What value does this generate to the business?
Thank you, moderator. When young people are offered decent work, you'd see an increase, an enhanced productivity level at the workplace. If young people are offered a decent work, and it's something that we hope that employers are offering or are going to offer young people who will be venturing into the labor market. Enhanced productivity.
Mm-hmm. It enhances productivity. Okay, yeah, that's a very good point. Because, and also loyalty. Like usually turnover rate is quite high among young people, especially when they are confronted with a reality that does not really meet their aspirations. So they try to move on to another business, or perhaps they even seek moving to another country for a better working conditions. And this has been quietly recognized across the globe of why people usually consider mobility. Now, a question has come up on basically that a lot of young people do have an idea, do have a concept to to get started with as a business model, but they never really receive the support. And here in particular in our session, we need to look at what's the role of the business, to help out those young people. I mean, there could be also an opportunity for business here to gain out of the support to young people, especially if this idea feeds into their supply chain or value chain or their operations. So, Millicent and Avinit, any thoughts on that? On young entrepreneurs not being able to find the skills, and what's the role of the business to help them?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think if you look pre-COVID, this was a situation, pre-existing situation before COVID, and I think the whole reason why we have young entrepreneurs councils in the Pacific is solely based on this aspect, where a lot of young people who have great ideas, they're at ideation stage of their business, and they need that extra support to ensure that they can actually make this into a reality. Now, financial aspects aside, and the registration aspects aside, and all that, the support is what's important. And being part of a private sector organization enables young people to do so. So now, most of the private sector organization members are business owners, as per the Young Entrepreneurs Council members. But aspiring entrepreneurs can actually link themselves with these young entrepreneurs and learn from their best practices as well. So we have a Facebook page, we have members who are constantly in these kind of platforms advocating for young people to voice out their concerns regarding entrepreneurship and tapping into business development services that our membership has access to. And also, there's a lot of accelerator programs that are out there as well. One that we are at FSEF have got as well is the FEE program, which is with the MDF. So getting in touch with these programs is very important. A lot of times, young people have this one particular bottleneck, and I have gone through this as well, is because we have a great idea, want to keep it up to ourselves. We don't want to explore it because somebody might steal it. At the same time, you need to be able to do your research about your product, see where you can get your startup capital from. Family and friends is the best avenue to start off with, and then explore from there. Test it out, do your research and development. Now, during COVID, you can still do that. I know it's going to be more difficult to establish startup because you don't have any known support mechanisms in terms of the financial structure of things, but you can still explore. You have so much, lockdown gives you so much space and time to explore these businesses. And I think if you come up with 3 business ideas every day and then do your research and development, you will be able to pick and find one that works for you. And again, approach young people in business for their advice. It's a simple, no-cost activity, and trust me, the networking aspect of just that alone is inspiring itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Millicent, you spoke about this is my question. Actually, we've run out of questions from colleagues and the audience. A question to you. You've talked about private-public partnership, and I wonder how important this is in our time now to create joint youth employment programs. Lote talked about internships or also apprenticeships were brought in to the discussion. That to what extent in the Pacific the public-private partnerships are popular, and what can we do about it to promote it? As we've now been emphasizing on the importance of bringing both parties together, government, workers, and business. Over to you.
Thanks very much. I'm quite new to public-private partnerships, but I can speak of the experience of the establishment of Young Entrepreneurs Council, Solomon Islands, in the sense that because we also tailored the model to the context of, you know, the challenges young entrepreneurs here face, or even aspiring entrepreneurs, that co-sharing of, you know, carrying that weight together has been quite efficient, in the sense that, you know, just for background information, the public-private partnership for the Young Entrepreneurs Council here in Solomons is through the Solomon Islands Chamber of Commerce and Industries, as well as the Ministry of Women, Youth, and Children Affairs. So these are the two key partners. For YEXI, you know, it's because we have that, we feel this sense of support from both sectors. I think it's particularly important for young organizations, particularly working in youth development, because it's such a huge issue here. It does set precedence for a great model. I think the only sort of challenge that we face, I mean, through YEXI, we have come up with our own locally tailored incubator programs, Innovation Blayumi, as well as recognizing the need for to introduce entrepreneurship to younger people, particularly those who are just coming into Form 5, 6, and 7. So that's, you know, the last 3 years of high school, noticing that our education curricular system doesn't promote, you know, being a business owner as a career pathway. You know, we are seeing these gaps and filling them in. And I think being a PPP establishment allows us, I guess, ease in order to do that. However, the scalability of our activities through this model, because for Solomons geographically, we are faced with one of the most challenging terrains, with 5,000 villages spread across 992 islands. So, you know, I guess the next step is to, you know, after a 3-year experience of this establishment, is to now review it and see how best we can scale it, not only just for entrepreneurship, but, you know, youth in agriculture, fisheries, yeah, and so forth. I hope that answers your question.
Great. Yeah, well, that's no, it does actually. Thank you very much. We just received also another question from the floor, and it's about regulation. So, what regulation should states come up with, other than existing initiatives in the panelist home countries, to further support young persons during this pandemic economic uncertainty? So, any regulations that would actually support young people during this time? Maybe Mererai, since we're referring here to regulations to support young people as a unionist, or also Mr. Khan can have something to say on that.
Thank you, moderator. I'd let Mr. Khan answer first.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. So yes, I guess we have to take a number of reforms and regulation changes in order to make it very conducive to the environment that we are in, whether it be at policy level or whether it be at legislative level. We, for example, I cannot speak on behalf of other countries in the Pacific, but for Fiji, as I said earlier on, like one impediment that we got rid of was the business license. So that is the first step. The other things that we can probably consider and look at, such as having more tax incentives to entice businesses to operate, say, in regions that they will not operate in, either regions or in areas that they may not be, where it's traditionally not looked at. So, for example, in Fiji, we have got tax-free zones. So outside the CBD areas, which is normally the rural and the other part of Fiji, and then the Maritime Islands, it's a tax-free zone. So maybe people need to capitalize on such opportunities. There's tax-free zones out there. We can probably get tax incentives for employers. So if they're hiring, say, youth, or if they're hiring people who from the informal sector, they could give you some tax brackets or something of that sort. Some tax benefits can be also provided. I think there is a lot of that, a lot of such regulations is out there. It's just that people are not aware of it, and I guess it comes down to us as policy makers. It's our job to probably make people aware of such incentives that's out there. There is probably other incentives that we can look at to entice or boost exporters in the export sector. If there is probably any impediments that's there, we could probably relook at it. In Fiji right now, we are undergoing our budget consultation process. So this probably will be a good time for private sector. I'm sure most of them have done their budget submission. And so this can be considered, these policy changes and regulation changes can be considered and as part of our budget consultations in the new budget. I think apart from that, we also need to look at regulations that will attract investments, probably foreign investment as well, or for probably for say Fijians living abroad to come back and work or invest in our country. There's a lot of Fijians who stay abroad and who would like to come invest in our country. So look at our policies, look at our regulations that will capture that particular segment or that particular market. So yeah, it's open for discussion, and we look to get some feedback. Naka.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for this. This obviously, it's interesting to see that there are some initiative, but he also talked about like areas where young people still, or people, they're not even informed about these things. And I think this is part of the responsibility of members of the union here, is to raise awareness about all of these regulations and to guide young people to be in a way to protect themselves, to be more knowledgeable about how they can receive support and how they could actually be protected in a vulnerable situation. So by this, I would like to conclude our session for today. We have completed the session perfectly on time. I would like to thank you all once again. Mr. Faizal Khan, the Director and Registrar of Cooperatives at the Ministry of Commerce, Trade, Tourism and Transport, Ms. Lote Lima, Member Services Manager of the Samoa Chamber of Commerce, Ms. Mererai Vatege, a lawyer and a young unionist at the National Union of Workers, Ms. Millicent Barty, an entrepreneur and a former chair of the Young Entrepreneurs Council in Solomon Islands, and finally, Mr. Avinit Narayan, a young entrepreneur and a founder of Suva-based enterprising Pacific Consultancy. I'm Kinan Al-Bahnasi. Thank you all very much. It was a pleasure to have you all, and I wish you a very lovely afternoon. Bye-bye.